You black kids eat so much. Maybe you should have flown economy where you belong. The words tore through the first-class cabin louder than the engines. Rebecca Thompson, flight attendant for 15 years, didn't whisper them. She performed them, lips curled in disdain as she snapped a tray shut. Three boys froze, identical in red polos and dark jeans. Passengers shifted uneasily. A businessman lowered his tablet. A woman pressed her pearls. Rebecca smirked and slid the last first-class meal to a drowsy passenger, 2 rows behind. "Excuse me," whispered Jordan King Jr., 8 years old, voice trembling but steady. "We ordered ours." Rebecca leaned in, venom sweet as honey. "Not for you. Eat your pretzels." She tossed the bag. It skidded across their tray like garbage. From seat 2A, a quiet man rose, tailored suit, calm eyes, protective hand on each son. His presence stilled the murmurs. He said nothing. Not yet. Outside, clouds split in silver streaks. Inside, injustice burned sharper than coffee. The cabin thought it saw humiliation. It had only seen the beginning. Welcome to Respect Wins Stories, the place where powerful tales come alive. No matter where you are watching this video from, whether it is New York, Texas, California, or anywhere across the United States, or even from the other side of the world, I would love to know where are you watching from today. Please share it in the comments below while you sit back, relax, and dive into a story that will move your heart and spark your imagination. Every story here carries a message, because in the end, respect always wins. Let us begin. 6 hours earlier, the King family boarded Skyline Airlines Flight 47 with joy. For the triplets, Jordan, Malik, and Jonas Jr., it was their first time in first class. Wide-eyed in red polos, they marveled at polished seats and glowing screens. Few noticed their father, Jordan King Sr., one of the youngest black CEOs in America, a billionaire who valued his sons above fortune. They were miracles after years of infertility struggles and near-death scares. Jonas, still fragile, needed meals for survival, but arrogance ignored that truth. What began as adventure would end as a public reckoning. The air inside Flight 47 grew heavier the moment Rebecca Thompson tossed that crumpled bag of pretzels onto the boy's tray. The gesture was small, but the meaning was massive. "You don't belong here." Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their wide leather seats, some whispered. Others avoided eye contact, pretending not to notice. Discrimination in first class wasn't new, but rarely was it so naked, so brazen. Jordan King Sr. sat perfectly still. He adjusted his cufflinks, his calm demeanor a razor edge. He knew arrogance burned hottest when it thought itself safe. And at 30,000 feet, Rebecca thought she was untouchable. "Excuse me," Malik Jr. whispered, his voice brave but cracking. "We were hungry." Rebecca leaned down, her perfume strong, her tone sugar-laced poison. "You'll survive. Don't be dramatic." She pushed the cart forward, the silver wheels clattering against the aisle. With her, the last meal disappeared. The businessman in 3B shifted. He leaned across the aisle and murmured, "They paid the same as the rest of us." Rebecca froze, her jaw tightening. Then, with a practiced smile, she hissed back, "Mind your business, sir. You don't know how demanding these people can be." Gasps. A camera clicked. Someone's phone screen glowed red. Recording. Jordan King Sr. reached forward, resting a hand on each boy's shoulder. His silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. Every insult was evidence. Every cruel glance, ammunition. He pulled out his laptop, typing slowly, deliberately, on the glowing screen, "Board of Directors, Skyline Airlines." Beneath it, a line only he knew by heart, "Owner, King Enterprises Holdings." The very airline humiliating his children belonged to him. Still, he said nothing. "Not yet." "Daddy," whispered Jonas Jr., the frailest of the three, clutching his stomach. His condition required a balanced meal. He couldn't go 6 hours without it. His lips were pale, his eyes watery. Jordan Sr.'s jaw tightened, but his tone stayed even. "Sip water, son. Just sip." Rebecca, hearing, smirked. "Maybe next time bring your own food." The cruelty wasn't ignorance, it was intent, and she wasn't finished. Minutes later, she returned with the captain, Marissa Rivera, who loomed with clipped authority. Rivera folded her arms, eyes narrowing on the family as if they were the disruption. "Is there a problem here?" Rivera asked loudly enough for the cabin to hear. "Yes," Jordan Sr. replied smoothly. His voice was calm, steady. "My children were denied meals we paid for." Rivera arched a brow. "Supplies are limited. Flight attendants prioritize passengers who fit standard expectations. If your family requires special treatment, perhaps economy would be more appropriate." The word economy stung sharper than turbulence. The passengers around them stirred. Someone muttered, "That's not right." Another whispered, "This is discrimination." Phones tilted high, but Rivera didn't care. She turned to Rebecca. "Proceed with standard service." Rebecca grinned. "Of course, Captain." The arrogance wasn't just one woman's bias. It was institutional, stamped into the authority of the uniform. Jordan Sr. closed his laptop. His reflection glimmered in the black screen, calm, unshaken. He leaned down and kissed Jonas's forehead. "Hold on, champ. Just hold on. 6 hours. 6 hours of hunger, humiliation, and silence would pass before landing. 6 hours in which the crew's cruelty grew bolder, their arrogance sharper. But silence is a strategy, and Jordan King Sr. had already decided by the time the wheels hit the ground, the sky would no longer protect them. The reckoning had already begun. The cabin lights dimmed as Flight 4047 settled into cruising altitude. Dinner trays clinked, glasses of wine poured, and laughter rippled faintly from passengers spared the sting of humiliation. But in row 2, 3 small boys sat with empty trays, the smell of roasted salmon and warm bread drifting like a taunt. Rebecca strode past again, her heels striking the aisle like gavel blows. She glanced at the boys, smirk tugging at her lips, then leaned toward a colleague by the galley. "See, already pouting. They always expect more." The words weren't whispered, they were meant to be heard. Jonas Jr. pressed his hand against his stomach. His condition made fasting dangerous. His twin brothers shifted closer, as if their nearness could shield him. "Water," Jordan said softly, passing his son a glass. He kept his voice low, his eyes sharp. The laptop lay open again, this time recording. The webcam caught everything. Rebecca's sneer, Rivera's indifference, the casual cruelty of a crew intoxicated by their own authority. From across the aisle, a middle-aged woman raised her phone, pressing record. "This is unbelievable," she whispered. Rebecca noticed. She marched over and jabbed a manicured finger toward the woman. "Ma'am, filming is prohibited." The woman didn't flinch. "So is discrimination." Murmurs swelled. Some passengers turned away, afraid to be involved. Others angled their phones lower, stealthier. The cabin itself had become a courtroom, and arrogance was putting itself on trial. Rivera reappeared, summoned by Rebecca's complaint, her uniform crisp, her tone iron. "Sir," she said, eyes drilling into Jordan Sr., "I'll need you to keep your children under control." He looked up slowly, steady as stone. "My children are seated, silent, denied food they paid for, and now humiliated. Which part requires control?" The captain's jaw ticked. "You're escalating." "No, Captain," he said, voice calm enough to cut. "You are." Gasps rippled again. Someone whispered, "He's right." Another, "This is going viral," but Rivera dismissed it with a wave. She leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough. "I decide who belongs in this cabin. Not you." The arrogance was deliberate, sharpened to draw blood. She turned on her heel, leaving silence behind. The triplets looked to their father. Their eyes shimmered, not just from hunger but from confusion. Children learn the rules of the world by watching, and right now the world was teaching them cruelty. Jordan Sr. squeezed their hands, his calm like a fortress. "Remember this," he whispered. "Not their words, your worth." Rebecca wasn't finished. When turbulence hit and trays rattled, she returned with exaggerated concern, kneeling beside another passenger. Loudly for the boys to hear, she said, "Some families just don't fit in first class. Money doesn't buy manners." Her words dripped like acid. Jonas Jr. trembled. The woman with the phone gasped audibly. The businessman in 3B muttered, "Enough." But Jordan Sr. stayed still, eyes locked on his screen. Every insult was documented, every act archived. His silence was not surrender, it was a countdown. As the hours dragged on, the harassment grew pettier. Water refills delayed, blankets misplaced, requests ignored, each slight stacked higher, like cards in a fragile tower, and all the while, Jonas's small body weakened, his face paling against the red of his polo. The arrogance thought it had won, but arrogance never sees the storm until it breaks. The father's fingers hovered above his keyboard, a single message drafted, but unsent. 6 words that once spoken would end careers, strip wings, and expose an airline's rotten heart. He didn't press send, not yet. The storm would land with them, and when it did, there would be no turbulence strong enough to save the guilty. The cabin had grown hushed, the kind of silence that hums with tension. Conversations died down. Forks clinked softer. The injustice had shifted the entire mood of First Class. And yet Rebecca carried herself like a victor. She breezed by with the cart, empty plates piled high, not once glancing at the 3 boys staring at their untouched trays. Jonas Jr. had leaned against his father's arm, weak from hunger. His breaths came shallow, lips dry. Malik and Jordan Jr. whispered to him, trying to distract him with jokes, but their eyes betrayed fear. Jordan Sr. adjusted his cufflinks again, the same motion he'd repeated all flight. Each time it looked casual. In truth, it was a code, a silent signal to his sons. I see, I hear, I act when the time is right. From behind, a passenger finally broke. This is outrageous, the man snapped, standing to his feet. You can't just deny children food. This isn't service, it's cruelty. The ripple was immediate. A few clapped softly, others nodded. But Rebecca's smirk widened. Sir, sit down or I'll have you removed at landing. Removed for what? He barked. For having a conscience? The tension snapped like a wire. Phones lifted higher now, unhit. Recordings captured Rebecca's venom, Rivera's indifference, and the sight of 3 black children with empty trays in First Class, while others dined. Rivera returned, her patience thinning. Sir, she said, staring down Jordan Sr., your family has become a disturbance. If this continues, I will order security to escort you off first. The cabin gasped. Even the crew behind her exchanged uneasy glances. This was more than arrogance. This was open war. Jordan Sr. leaned forward, voice even. Escort me off my own plane. Rivera blinked. He smiled faintly. Never mind. You'll learn soon enough. The words hung in the air like thunderclouds, confusing some, chilling others. Rebecca scoffed. Empty threats. He'll crawl back to economy where he belongs. She grabbed a napkin from the service tray and dropped it on Jonas Jr.'s lap. There, chew on that. Gasps erupted. Someone shouted, that's abuse. Another passenger stood, pointing his phone camera directly at her. The world's going to see that. Rivera spun, barking, turn that off. But it was too late. A dozen phones were already recording. The injustice wasn't hidden anymore. It was documented, live, undeniable. Jordan Sr. placed a hand over Jonas Jr.'s, steady and protective. His calm was almost eerie now. Malik leaned toward him, whispering, Daddy, are you mad? No, he replied softly. I'm patient. Rebecca stormed back toward the galley, muttering curses under her breath. Rivera followed, throwing sharp looks at passengers who dared meet her gaze. The remaining crew whispered, nerves creeping in as they realized the line had been crossed too far. The storm outside the windows flared, lightning flashing across the sky. Inside, another storm brewed, silent but far more dangerous. Jordan Sr. reopened his laptop, his fingers poised. The unsent message still glowed at the bottom of the screen. 6 words, simple but final. He hovered over the send button, his reflection cold steel in the black bezel. The boys leaned against him, exhausted but trusting. Around them, The cabin's energy had shifted. Sympathy swelled. Anger simmered. Bystanders were no longer passive. They were witnesses, jurors ready for justice. The seatbelt sign dinged. Descent had begun. The crew strapped in, oblivious to the fate already written. Jordan closed his laptop with a click that sounded like a gavel striking wood. He whispered to his sons, "Hold on. When we land, everything changes." And in the charged silence of first class, even the engine seemed to pause, as though waiting for the verdict. The wheels screeched against the runway, a metallic groan echoing through the cabin as Flight 47 touched down. Seatbelts clicked, bags shifted overhead, and the usual chorus of sighs filled the air. But in row 2 there was no sigh of relief. Only stillness, a quiet that burned hotter than rage. Rebecca unbuckled with a flourish, her smile smug. "Finally," she muttered, "we'll be rid of them." She tugged at her blazer, adjusting herself as if stepping into victory. Captain Rivera's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Please remain seated until we arrive at the gate." Her tone carried authority, but it was brittle now, stripped of confidence. She had seen the phones, the recordings. She had heard the whispers. Still, arrogance clung to her like armor. Jordan King Sr. leaned down, brushing Jonas Jr.'s hair back. The boy's face was pale, but he managed a small smile. His father kissed his forehead, then opened his laptop one final time. His finger hovered over the glowing draft message. Immediate termination of Flight 47 crew. Grounds, documented misconduct and discrimination. Execute upon landing. He pressed send. The email traveled faster than the taxiing plane, flashing across the airline's internal network, landing in the inboxes of board members and senior executives, all of whom answered to him. At the front of the cabin, 2 uniformed security officers stepped inside before the seatbelt sign even switched off. The air shifted. Passengers sat straighter, eyes wide. Phones rose higher, eager to record history, unraveling. "Rebecca Thompson?" one officer asked. Her smirk faltered. "Why, yes. You're coming with us." Gasps erupted. Rebecca's jaw dropped, indignation flaring. "What? For what?" "Discrimination, recorded misconduct. Orders from the airline's executive office." She laughed nervously, glancing at Rivera. "This is a mistake. They can't." "Ma'am," the officer cut in, "the orders came from the owner of Skyline Airlines himself." Confusion spread across Rebecca's face, then horror as her gaze darted to row 2. Jordan Sr. sat calmly, hands folded, his sons leaning against him. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He only nodded once like a judge acknowledging a verdict. Passengers erupted, whispers turning to cheers. "He owns the airline? No way. That's the father?" Phones captured every angle, every second of Rebecca's downfall. Captain Rivera shot to her feet. "This is absurd." She followed protocol. "You can't just..." The second officer turned. "Captain Rivera, you're relieved of duty. You'll surrender your wings pending investigation." The color drained from Rivera's face. Her authority, the thing she'd wielded like a blade, was ripped away in a sentence. She tried to protest, but her words faltered as she noticed every phone aimed at her, every passenger waiting to see what justice looked like. The officers moved forward, handcuffing Rebecca as gasps and flashes filled the cabin. Her voice rose shrill, cracking under pressure. "I gave 15 years to this airline. 15 years. And ended it in 15 minutes, someone muttered. Applause broke out, scattered but growing. Jordan Sr. remained silent, protective arms around his sons. His patience had blossomed into power, revealed at the perfect moment. His dignity stood taller than any arrogance could. The boys' eyes widened as they watched Rebecca led away in cuffs, Rivera stripped of command. To them, it wasn't just victory. It was proof that silence, strategy, and truth could outlast cruelty. And for everyone else on Flight 47, it was the beginning of a story they'd never forget. The cabin buzzed with electricity, the kind of murmur usually reserved for breaking news, because that's exactly what this moment had become. Dozens of passengers were already live streaming, their comments flooding. CEO shuts down racist attendant. Skyline Airlines done for. Justice at 30,000 feet. Rebecca stumbled as the officers guided her down the aisle. She twisted toward Rivera. Do something. You're the captain. Rivera rose, her face pale, but her voice still sharp. This is outrageous. He can't. She stopped mid-sentence. Every passenger stared at her like a spotlight. Phones aimed. Truth recorded. The arrogance that once felt like armor now weighed like chains. Jordan King Sr. finally spoke, his voice calm, unhurried. Captain Rivera. She froze at the sound of her name. You looked me in the eye and said my family didn't belong in first class. You enforced cruelty as policy. You watched my son suffer and called it protocol. His tone never rose, but the silence it commanded was louder than thunder. Rivera swallowed. He opened his laptop, turning the screen toward her. On it was the Skyline Airlines ownership ledger. His name sat at the top. Jordan Elias King, majority shareholder, CEO of King Enterprises Holdings. Gasps rippled like a wave. Rebecca's face crumpled as realization hit. Rivera's eyes widened, disbelief crashing into fear. You didn't just humiliate passengers, Jordan continued. You humiliated the family that owns this airline. The words landed heavier than any gavel. Rivera staggered. I didn't know. That's the problem. Jordan cut in smoothly. You never cared to know. You saw 3 black boys and made them small in your mind. You saw me and decided silence meant weakness. But silence was simply patience. Applause thundered through the cabin. Passengers stood, clapping, cheering. The businessman from 3B shouted, about time someone held them accountable. The woman with pearls whispered, this is justice. Rebecca thrashed against the officers. I didn't mean it was just words, Jordan said, voice low, steady, nearly starved my son tonight. Words that could have killed him. Words end careers. Her knees buckled. She was dragged down the aisle, her smirk long gone, replaced by the raw panic of a toppled tyrant. Rivera tried to gather herself, but her hands trembled as she reached for her hat, then stopped, realizing it no longer belonged to her. One of the officers stepped forward. Captain Rivera, you are hereby relieved of all duties. Please surrender your insignia. Her fingers shook as she unclipped the gleaming wings from her chest. For 15 years, they had been her pride, her shield, her identity. Now, under the eyes of passengers and the cameras of the world, she dropped them into the officer's hand. The silence was deafening. The arrogance was gone. Only shame remained. Jordan glanced at his sons. What do you see? He asked them softly. Malik Jr. whispered. She lost her wings. And why? Jordan pressed. Because she forgot we had ours. Jonas Jr. said weakly, his small voice rising like a verdict. Tears filled Jordan's eyes, but he blinked them away. He kissed Jonas's head and straightened in his seat. The triplets smiled faintly, their fear dissolving into awe. They had seen injustice, but they were also watching justice unfold in real time. And justice was far from finished, because the cabin door was opening, and waiting at the gate were more cameras, more executives, more consequences. The descent into humiliation had only begun. The jet bridge hissed as the cabin doors opened. A rush of airport air swept in, carrying with it the sound of cameras clicking, voices calling, the thrum of a crowd waiting. Word had already spread. The humiliation that began at 30,000 feet was now global. 2 executives in tailored suits stood at the gate, flanked by additional security. Their expressions were grim, eyes fixed on the scene unfolding inside the aircraft. One leaned toward the officer. Remove the captain as well. We'll handle the announcement. Rivera stiffened. Wait, I'm the pilot in command. This is my flight. No longer, the executive said coldly. You've been stripped of authority. Passengers erupted into whispers. Phones angled to catch her face as 2 officers moved forward. Rivera's composure cracked. I've given everything to this airline, she cried, her voice trembling. From his seat, Jordan Sr. finally rose. He adjusted his blazer. his sons holding his hands as they stood beside him. Calm, unhurried, he walked toward the aisle where Rivera stood frozen. The entire cabin leaned in, breath held. "You treated my children like intruders," he said, his voice steady, resonant. "You saw their skin before their seats, their age before their humanity, their presence as an inconvenience instead of a blessing, and you dared call it protocol." Rivera's lips quivered. "I made a mistake." "No," Jordan corrected gently but firmly. "You revealed yourself." He turned slightly, his voice carrying to every passenger. "This is not only about my family. It is about every family told they do not belong. About every child who has been silenced by arrogance disguised as authority." Applause thundered. Passengers cheered, some standing, others with tears in their eyes. Phones streamed every second, the world watching arrogance bow to dignity. Rebecca, now cuffed and pale, spat bitterly. "You think you've won?" Jordan met her glare calmly. "There is no winning in cruelty. There is only exposure, and today you exposed yourself." The officers guided her down the aisle, her protests drowned beneath applause. Rivera tried to step aside, but security blocked her path. Her wings already surrendered, her reputation shattered, she stood trembling under the weight of her downfall. Jordan paused beside her. For a moment silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then he leaned close, his words sharp as glass. "You wanted to decide who belonged in this cabin. I decide who belongs in this airline, and you don't." Gasps, murmurs, and then cheers louder than before. The boys beamed, pride swelling in their young faces. Malik, Jr., whispered, "Daddy, you didn't even shout." Jordan smiled faintly. "Power doesn't shout, it speaks once." With that, he guided his sons toward the open door. The cameras outside exploded in flashes as they stepped into the jet bridge. 3 identical boys in red polos walking with dignity beside their father, while behind them 2 disgraced women were escorted out in cuffs and silence. The contrast was cinematic. Innocence paired with justice, arrogance crushed beneath truth. Passengers poured out, many pausing to thank the kings. Some shook Jordan's hand, others bent down to tell the boys, "You're heroes." But Jordan said nothing more. His silence was victory. His patience finally revealed as power. And as the family walked into the terminal, a journalist's voice called above the noise, "Mr. King, what will happen to the crew?" Jordan turned, the cameras catching the steel in his eyes. "They already know," he said. And with that, he led his sons into the terminal lights, leaving the wreckage of arrogance behind. The terminal was alive with chaos. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, and passengers still buzzing from the flight spilled into the gate area like witnesses leaving a courtroom. Word of what had happened had spread faster than luggage on a conveyor belt, and the world was hungry for justice. Rebecca Thompson stumbled. Cuffed hands pulled tight as security escorted her toward a waiting police unit. Her face was blotched with panic, eyes darting desperately to anyone who might defend her. None did. Not the passengers she mocked, not the colleagues she conspired with, not even the captain she'd leaned on. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking as microphones thrust forward. "It was a misunderstanding. I didn't mean," but her words drowned beneath the chants, "Justice! Justice!" The crowd's judgment was final. Captain Rivera walked beside her, head bowed, hat removed, her golden wings gone. Her steps were wooden, mechanical. She had flown for 15 years, commanded storms, landed in crises, but she had never faced a descent like this. For the first time, she wasn't the authority, she was the accused. Airline executives closed in, their expressions grim. One, a tall man in a Navy suit, spoke loud enough for cameras. "Effective immediately, both employees are terminated." Skyline Airlines does not condone discrimination in any form. The statement was rehearsed, corporate damage control, but the truth was obvious. The order hadn't come from them. It had come from the man standing calmly behind his 3 sons. Jordan King stood tall, blazer unwrinkled, his presence commanding the room without effort. The triplets clutched his hands, their small frames shielded by his calm authority. He didn't look at the cameras, didn't bask in the spectacle. His focus never strayed from his children. "Daddy," Malik whispered, tugging his sleeve. They're taking her away." Jordan knelt to their level, his voice low but strong. "Yes, because actions have consequences. Remember that." Jonas Jr., pale but steadier now, asked, "Even grown-ups get in trouble." Jordan smiled faintly. "Especially grown-ups." The journalists pounced, their questions rapid-fire. "Mr. King, is it true you own Skyline Airlines? Will you pursue charges? What will happen to the crew?" For the first time, Jordan lifted his gaze to the crowd. His voice carried, calm yet unyielding. "What happened on Flight 47 is not just about my family. It is about every passenger who has been disrespected, every child who has been diminished. Tonight, accountability begins, not because of who I am, but because of what was done." Applause erupted, not just from passengers but from bystanders gathered in the terminal. Even weary travelers paused to clap, phones raised high to capture the moment. Rebecca shouted desperately as she was pushed toward the exit. "You can't do this. I gave my life to this airline." Jordan didn't flinch. He didn't even look at her. His silence was louder than her cries, his stillness sharper than her thrashing. Rivera's voice cracked as she tried one last time. "Mr. King, please. I have a family." Jordan turned his head slightly, meeting her tearful eyes. For a heartbeat, he said nothing. Then, with quiet finality, he replied, "So do I." The words landed like a hammer. Rivera's shoulders collapsed, and she was led away, her wings gone forever. The triplets watched closely, their father's example sinking deep into their hearts. They weren't just witnessing justice, they were learning dignity, resilience, and the power of truth. The cameras kept rolling, the world kept watching, and the fall of arrogance had only just begun. The terminal overflowed with voices, but the loudest was not Rebecca's protests or Rivera's pleas. It was the crowd's collective judgment, echoing across phones, news feeds, and live streams that spread the story far beyond Gate C. Headlines were already appearing on glowing screens. Skyline Airlines crew removed after discrimination scandal. CEO's family targeted at 30,000 feet. Justice served on flight. Passengers from first class gave their accounts to reporters, each testimony sharpening the blade of truth. The businessman from 3B told cameras, "I watched 3 hungry children be denied food while others ate. That wasn't a mistake. That was deliberate cruelty." The woman with pearls, her hands trembling, said, "I'll never forget the look on those boys' faces. You don't treat any child like that, let alone 3 miracles sitting beside their father." Inside the terminal, executives scrambled, phones pressed to their ears, damage control memos flying, but their voices faltered whenever Jordan's name appeared. He wasn't just a VIP, he was the owner. The man whose word could end careers, restructure fleets, or dismantle leadership overnight. Rebecca, now being escorted past flashing cameras, tried to salvage her reputation. "I've been loyal. 15 years. This is unfair." But fairness was not hers to claim. Passengers jeered, some shouted, "Shame." Others shook their heads. The internet was already dissecting her words, her actions, her downfall. Clips spread with captions, "Not for you, eat your pretzels." Every syllable was a nail in the coffin of her career. Rivera walked slower, shoulders hunched, her once crisp uniform now feeling like shackles. A reporter asked, "Captain Rivera, do you have any comment?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She stared at the ground, silenced by disgrace. Meanwhile, Jordan stood beside his sons, shielding them from the chaos. He knelt once more, eye level with them. "You'll see a lot of noise around us," he said gently. "Don't let it scare you. We know the truth, and the world is just catching up." Jordan Jr. asked, "Daddy, will they go to jail?" "Maybe," Jordan replied. "But what matters is they'll never do this to another child again." The triplets nodded, understanding more than their years should require. Executives approached, led by Skyline's interim operations chief. His tie was crooked, his face pale. "Mr. King," he began, voice heavy with desperation, "on behalf of Skyline Airlines, I want to extend our deepest apologies. This incident is unacceptable. We're prepared to release a statement immediately and compensate your family. Jordan's gaze was steady, unblinking. This isn't about money. The executive swallowed. Of course. Then what do you require? Jordan looked down at his boys. They clutched his hands, eyes shining with trust. Then he raised his head. I require accountability, not just for my children, but for every passenger who pays for dignity and is denied it. The words cut deeper than any demand for cash. Executives nodded, shaken. They knew this was bigger than one scandal. It was systemic. Rebecca screamed again as she was pushed toward the terminal exit. You'll regret this, she shrieked, voice cracking. Jordan didn't look at her, didn't need to. The crowd's applause drowned her out, louder and louder until she was nothing more than a forgotten echo. The triplets leaned against him, weary but proud. Passengers approached to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell the boys they were brave. Each gesture was a reminder that dignity multiplies when witnessed, that truth shines brighter when exposed. And as the flashbulbs lit the terminal, the image that would circle the world emerged. A father standing calm, 3 identical sons at his side, while arrogance was marched away in disgrace. The police escort moved swiftly, clearing a path through the terminal as Rebecca and Rivera were led away in handcuffs. Cameras flashed relentlessly, recording every tear, every stumble. Their uniforms, once symbols of authority, now marked them as disgraced relics. Passengers lingered, unwilling to leave, as though they were part of history and wanted to savor the last note of justice. Reporters shouted over each other, "Mr. King, will Skyline face lawsuits? Is this the end of Rebecca Thompson's career? What message do you want the world to hear?" Jordan King Sr. stood tall, his sons pressed against his sides. His silence drew more weight than a dozen statements. Then finally he spoke, his voice steady and resonant. The message is simple. Dignity is not optional. Not in first class, not in economy, not anywhere. My children are not props for arrogance. They are proof that perseverance creates miracles. Tonight, they were denied food, denied humanity, but they were not denied justice. That belongs to them. That belongs to all of us. Applause erupted, thunderous, unstoppable. The triplets beamed. Their fear dissolved into pride. Jonas Jr., pale but smiling, whispered, "Daddy, you sound like a superhero." Jordan chuckled softly, squeezing his hand. "No, son, I'm just your father. That's enough." The executives behind him nodded gravely, already drafting public statements, already feeling the weight of a CEO who didn't just hold shares, he held the moral high ground. Rebecca's cries echoed faintly as she was shoved into a squad car. "This isn't fair. I didn't mean it." But the world had already judged. Her words were drowned beneath the chants rising in the terminal. Justice, justice. Captain Rivera was quieter, her face streaked with tears, her wings gone. When she was pushed into the second vehicle, she looked back once at Jordan, as if searching for mercy, but he didn't meet her eyes. Mercy belonged to those who protected children, not those who abandoned them. The triplets tugged at his sleeves. "Can we go home now?" Malik asked. Jordan bent down, brushing their hair with gentle hands. "Yes, home, but remember this day, not because of what was taken from us, but because of what we reclaimed." As they walked toward the private exit, passengers clapped in waves, some reaching out to touch his arm, others leaning down to tell the boys, "You're strong, you're brave." Strangers became allies, witnesses became advocates. The story was no longer about humiliation, it was about transformation. News anchors on nearby screens were already replaying clips from inside the cabin. Rebecca's sneer, Rivera's dismissal, the tossed pretzel packet, and finally, Jordan's quiet authority as he revealed his ownership. Each clip replayed like chapters of a cautionary tale, one destined for headlines, lawsuits, and boardrooms. Outside, the storm that had chased Flight 447 across the skies had broken. Rain lashed against the glass, lightning crashed. But beneath the storm, the King family walked calmly, sheltered not by weather, but by truth. At the exit, Jordan paused, one hand on the glass door. He turned back briefly, scanning the terminal where arrogance had fallen and justice had risen. His sons waited, their small hands warm in his. With a final breath, he whispered so only they could hear, "This isn't just the end of their flight, it's the beginning of yours." And with that, they stepped into the night, a father and his miracle sons, leaving behind the ruins of arrogance, carrying with them only dignity. The following morning, sunlight spilled across the King family's penthouse like liquid gold. The chaos of the night before lingered in headlines and trending feeds, but inside their home, peace finally had a chance to breathe. Jordan sat at the breakfast table sipping coffee, watching his three boys devour pancakes with the appetite of children who had been denied the simplest of meals just hours earlier. The contrast was almost poetic. The night before, humiliation and hunger; this morning, laughter and syrup-stained smiles. Jonas Jr., the frailest, licked chocolate from his fingers and looked up shyly. "Daddy, are you mad it happened?" Jordan leaned back, considering. The easy answer was yes, but he chose the deeper truth. "I'm not mad, son. I'm grateful." The boys froze, confused. "Grateful?" Malik asked, tilting his head. Jordan nodded slowly. "Because the world needed to see, not just what happened to us, but what happens to families like ours every day when people with power forget humanity. If it had stayed hidden, it would have kept happening. Now the world can't ignore it." The boys exchanged glances, still processing. Jordan smiled faintly, letting the lesson settle at their pace. From the kitchen, their mother, Amira King, joined them. She had been at a business retreat during the flight and had returned overnight, rushing home when she saw the news. She kissed each boy's forehead before sitting beside her husband. "They didn't just see injustice," she said softly. "They saw dignity. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't lose control. You showed them what real power looks like." Jordan reached for her hand, their fingers interlacing. For a moment the room was quiet, not with tension but with gratitude. The triplets went back to eating, the sound of forks clinking against plates like a gentle symphony. Malik broke the silence. "Daddy, people clapped for us." "Yes," Jordan said, "because when you stand for what's right, people recognize it, even strangers." "But what if nobody had clapped?" Jordan Jr. asked. His eyes were serious, older than his years. "Then we would still know the truth," their father replied. "And sometimes, knowing you kept your dignity is more important than applause." The lesson sank in, deeper than textbooks could teach. Later that morning, the family gathered in the living room as news anchors replayed footage from Flight 4. Rebecca's sneer, Rivera's cold dismissal, and the moment Jordan revealed ownership, the mic drop that silenced arrogance worldwide. The triplets watched, their faces solemn. When the clip ended, Jonas Jr. whispered, "She looked so small at the end. She made herself small." Amira said gently, "She forgot kindness, and without kindness, power shrinks." Jordan kissed the top of her hand. Exactly. For the first time since the ordeal, laughter returned fully, bubbling through the penthouse as the boys raced off to play. Amira leaned against Jordan's shoulder. "You protected them," she murmured. He exhaled slowly. "No, they protected me. Their faith reminded me why patience mattered, why silence mattered, why dignity wins more battles than fury." He looked out at the skyline beyond the glass, the city alive and loud. The storm had passed, but its lesson remained. Dignity is louder than arrogance, and patience outlives cruelty. And though the world was still talking, for this family, the only voices that mattered were the ones laughing down the hall. By noon, the King family story had crossed oceans. News anchors debated it on morning shows, hashtags trended worldwide, and clips from Flight 47 racked up millions of views. Some called it the pretzel incident, others justice at 30,000. But whatever the title, the meaning was clear. People had seen the ugliness of arrogance and the quiet triumph of dignity. At the King headquarters downtown, employees gathered in the atrium, watching the live coverage on giant screens. When Jordan Sr. walked through the revolving doors with his sons and Amira, applause erupted. Not polite clapping, but thunderous, heartfelt ovations that echoed off marble walls. An executive stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Sir, I've worked in aviation 20 years. I've seen discrimination swept under rugs. Yesterday, you didn't just protect your sons, you protected all of us who've ever been told we don't belong. Jordan clasped her shoulder. Thank you, but the real heroes are the children. They reminded us all why justice matters. The triplets blushed, hiding behind their mother. Later that afternoon, letters began pouring in, thousands of them from parents, thanking the Kings for standing tall, from children saying they felt braver because of the trip, from airline staff admitting they'd been silent witnesses for too long and promising change. One letter stood out. It came from a 10-year-old boy in Chicago. Dear Mr. King, when I saw your sons on TV, I felt proud. I'm black too, and sometimes people say I don't belong, but your boys showed me I do. Someday I want to be strong like them. Jordan read the letter aloud at dinner, his voice thick with emotion. Malik Jr. asked quietly, "So we helped him?" "Yes," his father said, "and many more. What hurt us yesterday is helping others today." The boys smiled, pride glowing in their eyes. The community's response grew beyond letters. Churches held sermons about dignity. Schools used the story as a lesson in resilience. Activists cited it in speeches about equality, and everywhere people repeated the image of three small boys in red polos, walking calmly beside their father while arrogance was led away in cuffs. Amira watched the coverage with quiet pride. "Do you realize what this means?" she asked Jordan one night. "This isn't just a scandal, it's a turning point. Our boys will grow up knowing they changed something." Jordan exhaled, gaze drifting to the city skyline. "I didn't set out to change the world. I just wanted them to eat dinner in peace. And that's why it mattered," she replied. Silence fell, not heavy, but sacred. The triplets were asleep in their rooms, their laughter now dreams. And in that silence, Jordan realized the truth. Injustice may roar, but dignity whispers and the world listens longer to the whisper. The following Sunday, the family attended church. As they entered, the congregation rose, clapping, singing, embracing them as symbols of courage. A pastor declared from the pulpit, "God turned their trial into testimony. What was meant to humiliate has become a lesson for nations." The triplets squeezed each other's hands, cheeks glowing with shy pride. They weren't just survivors of cruelty, they were beacons of hope, and their father, still calm, still quiet, understood the legacy had only begun. Weeks passed, and the frenzy of headlines began to fade, but the impact remained. Skyline Airlines announced sweeping reforms, mandatory bias training, stricter accountability policies, and a new passenger bill of rights, drafted in part by Jordan King Sr. The scandal had cost them millions, but it had also forced an industry-wide reckoning. Yet inside the King household, life softened back into routine. School mornings meant backpacks and cereal bowls, evenings meant homework sprawled across the kitchen counter, and weekends meant soccer games and family movie nights. The storm had passed, replaced by the gentle rhythm of ordinary love. One quiet evening, Jordan stood on the balcony, city lights glittering below. His sons joined him, each holding a mug of hot cocoa. The wind tugged at their red polos, the same ones they'd worn on Flight 47, now washed and folded but still carrying the memory of that night. "Daddy," Malik asked, sipping carefully, "do people still talk about what happened?" Jordan nodded. "Yes, but not as much. Stories fade from the news. What matters is what stays in people's hearts." Jonas Jr. looked thoughtful. "Did we change anything?" Jordan turned, meeting their hopeful eyes. "Yes. You changed everything. You showed the world that silence can hold power, that children deserve dignity, that even in the face of cruelty, patience can win." The boys exchanged small smiles, pride warming their faces. From inside, Amira called them for dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, and the laughter of family life replaced the echoes of the past. Jordan lingered a moment longer, gazing out at the skyline. He remembered Rebecca's smirk, Rivera's cold dismissal, the sting of injustice. But more than that, he remembered the applause, the cheers, the look in his sons' eyes as they saw arrogance crumble before truth. Amira joined him, slipping her arm around his waist. "You're still thinking about it," she said softly. Jordan exhaled, "Not about them, about us, about what it means for the boys to carry this memory forward." "They'll carry more than memory," she replied. "They'll carry resilience, they'll carry pride, and they'll carry the lesson you taught them, that true power doesn't shout. It simply stands." He kissed her forehead, gratitude filling his chest. Later that night, after the boys had gone to bed, Jordan tucked Jonas in last. The frailest of the three, he had suffered most that night, yet his smile was the widest now. "Daddy," he whispered sleepily, "next time we fly, do you think they'll treat us better?" Jordan brushed a hand through his son's hair. "Next time they'll know better." As the boy drifted off, Jordan stood quietly in the doorway, watching his sons breathe in unison, identical faces lit by moonlight. Miracle children, once denied life, once denied food, now thriving, victorious. He closed the door gently, his heart steady. Injustice had tried to humiliate them. Arrogance had tried to diminish them. But in the end, dignity had triumphed, and the legacy wasn't in the downfall of 2 employees or the reform of an airline. It was in 3 small boys who had learned, forever, that they belonged. Jordan returned to the balcony, the city lights twinkling like stars. He whispered into the night, a vow carried on the wind: "They will never be made small again." And with that, peace settled, not just over the King family, but over everyone who had seen the truth unfold at 30,000 feet and realized that justice, once denied, could still soar. And that's another story shared here on Respect Wins Stories. If this one touched you, inspired you, or made you think, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us bring more powerful stories your way. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or state in the comments, and let's see how far these stories travel across America. Remember, no matter the struggle, no matter the ending, respect always wins. See you in the next story.